Okay, I would say we have a good amount of people attending now. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar together with the Florida Sun magazine as a co-host and our speakers, Mr. Marcus Ganu from Visa Business Plans and attorney at law and a member of our board of directors of the JBC, Timo Becker. Today, we offer you a webinar as a webinar series. We offer you at the JBC several webinars. Next week, we will have one also on Tuesday at 10 a.m. together with the GMCBB, with the Greater Miami Convention Visitors Bureau on the update on the tourism sector. All webinars are recorded on YouTube, so you can also find this webinar from today if you miss anything. On our YouTube channel. I will send you the link after this webinar via email. And yeah, so as you all know, the GABC, we are, the German American Business Chamber. We've been in Miami for the past 32 years now. And our main goal is to help our German community and anyone that would like to be part of it to get connected, to broaden their network. We will soon hopefully be able to start networking events again, at least in a small amount of groups, but to slowly go back to normal, at least. Well, we will still have to figure out the exact plan regarding the CDC guidelines, but we will still continue to offer you regular webinars, as this is a very good way, we think, to help you, provide you with knowledge, share with the knowledge that our members have. If you are a member and you would like to be a speaker at one of our webinars, then you're more than welcome. Please just reach out to us and we can see if there's an interesting topic that we can share with our other members and community. So this is about the JBC. Then Kirsten, Lorraine, would you like to introduce the Florida Sun?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Leonie, for having me today. Hello, everybody. Most of you are familiar with the Florida Sun magazine. The Florida Sun magazine has actually been around for over 21 years, and it is delivered in Europe as well as in the United States 4 times per year. Florida Sun magazine is the #1 Florida magazine written in German language. So Florida Sun magazine, the publication, the website floridasunmagazine.com, and also the weekly e-newsletter that goes to about 10,000 subscribers weekly, deliver a relevant editorial to our readers, important editorial to readers and viewers. Why is it so attractive? Because of that reason. It talks about Florida lifestyle, visa and immigration, investment and real estate in Florida, the do's and don'ts in Florida, insider tips, and so on and so on. Also, Florida Sun offers readers, and that's very important, it offers readers and viewers to connect with business leaders in the market of Florida, with Florida professionals, and vice versa. Florida professionals have the opportunity through Florida Sun and its components to connect with our readers, with our viewers, with their potential clientele. So that's it. Back to Leonie.
Thank you very much. So as you've all seen, today's discussion round is about the question, what happens if I purchase a real estate, let's say in Florida? Will this actually provide me with the investment visa, or what other visa options would I have, or what other steps for that real estate purchase? So exactly this question, I think many Germans have this question, and this is why we thought, let's just speak about it a little bit. So we have our 2 speakers, Mr. Marcus Ganu and Mr. Timo Becker. I would just quickly like to introduce them to you before we start with the discussion round. So let's start with Timo Becker, who's, as I said, on the board of directors here with the JVC and an attorney at law. He's an attorney here in Miami and Florida. Timo's admitted to practice law in Florida and Germany as a Rechtsanwalt, and he's a board certified specialist in tax law in Germany as a Fachanwalt für Steuerrecht. In his international practice, Timo focuses on foreign direct investments of mainly German-speaking clients in the US. And his areas of expertise include international tax law, business and corporate law, business formation and acquisition, as well as structuring of real investments with legal entities and trusts. So he's the go-to person for you when it comes to any of these questions. Timo has been closely connected to the GABC since 2012. And yes, he is also not only a board of director member, he's also the treasurer of the GABC. Thank you, Timo, very much for being here today, for taking the time, for sharing your knowledge with us. We can also share his information. I will share his email and his website in a second in the chat. Please, as a side note for everybody, when you send us questions, do only use the Q&A, do not use the chat, so that we can use the chat for links and anything important for you. And any questions that you have throughout the discussion round, just send them through the Q&A and then we can answer them. And then Markus Gano. Markus Gano received a, Markus Gano from Visa Business Plan, sorry. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from the University of Florida and an MBA Management from the Bocconi University in Milan, Italy. Mr. Scano was also visiting a scholar at Michigan State University under the prestigious H. Humphrey Fellowship with a focus on entrepreneurship, venture capital, and high growth enterprises. And Markus Scano is a certified coach from the University of Miami. In 2009, he then founded Visa Business Plans, and since then his company has written more than 6,000 customized and effective business plans used for raising capital and for migration purposes. Drawing from his own experience as an immigrant and recipient of an O1 visa in entrepreneurship and management of entrepreneurial ventures, Markus Gano has established himself as a successful consultant and business plan writer with international experience, assisting clients across Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America, and the United States. So he's not an immigration lawyer, but he's very, very, very good in helping you with any questions when it comes to how to design your business plan, what to take into consideration in order to get this business plan through when you have your interview. Also, thank you very much, Marco, for being here today, for taking your time and sharing your knowledge. And
Thank you.
I think let's go ahead and start. So again, for everybody, if you have any questions, this is a discussion round. So a discussion can also be formed by questions that you sent to us. So please just feel free, but yeah, use the Q&A button. And we actually also have already received a question. I think I would ask this to Timo. What amount of money would I have to invest for an investment visa? So I think it's the number one question everybody is wondering, what forms an investment visa when it comes to the actual investment?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. And the answer is a very lawyerly answer, and it depends. You know, it depends. It always depends on the business itself and the needs of the business. Let me say that. Maybe first I will talk a little bit about the general requirements for an E2 visa, and then we'll see how these elements play into real estate investments. And also the question, of course, will be answered: what amount of capital has to be invested? So when it comes to the general requirements for an E2 visa, we have 3 to 4 requirements that are all very well written out in the Foreign Affairs Manual. We have, first, there needs to be a treaty between the US and the country from where the applicant comes. And of course, the applicant has to be a national of the treaty country. Then the applicant must have invested or is in the process of investing a substantial amount of capital in a bona fide enterprise here in the US. So the substantial amount of capital is the first requirement that is a question here. And as we say, you know, it depends on the size of the business. Maybe Marco can also say something about that. There is no set amount in the law. There's only guidelines. There's a proportionality test that needs to be fulfilled. But in general, from experience, I would say that amount of 100,000 to 150,000 is a safe application. You know, in real estate investments, this amount will usually be exceeded in most of the times. But there are a lot of other requirements, or few one. So it cannot be a small amount. So it cannot be a small amount, and it cannot be a marginal enterprise, which means basically that the amount that is invested, or the enterprise itself from its profits that it's generating, must be more than just to support the applicant and his family. So there must be a contribution to the U.S. economy, and just an investment that will barely support the applicant will not suffice. So then it has to be an active business, cannot be a passive investment, where we would talk about a little bit about real estate investments later on, and how they can be considered active versus passive. With real estate, usually the active test and the marginal test are the most important factors here. But to sum it up, to answer the question, there is no set amount. So only from experience, we can say 100 to 150,000 is a relatively safe application. As Marco knows, also, you know, that these decisions that immigration does here, or that the consulate officer will make, are all discretional. So there's a huge, the officer has a lot of discretion how they how they view this investment, and it's up to the applicant to fulfill the requirement as good as possible, so the officer, you know, will give them a positive decision. And as I said, you know, most of the officers will consider 100 to 150,000 a substantial investment. It was a decision by the immigration courts, a precedent that said, I mean, years ago, that said $50,000 is already a substantial amount. But that is an old decision, and you know, it always depends on what the applicant wants to achieve, the investor wants to achieve with this investment. Maybe Marco, you can, you know, also from your experience, say something about the investment amount, or.
Sure, I'll be glad to share our view and experience when it comes to the investment amount. I'd like to explain and to our clients, the minimum investment is not a number, it is a concept. What do I mean by this? Look, I tell our clients, so let's forget for a minute that you're applying for a visa. How much does your business need in order to be operational to begin with? And then we like to tie the investment to the concept that Timo shared, which is, you know, we want the investor to make more money than they need to cover the living expenses in the United States. So again, it's a concept, and it really depends on the business. I'd like to share a couple of examples. As Timo said, most likely, if you're going through the typical real estate investment, let's say buying an investment property with the Miami prices, you know, you can maybe with $200,000, you can get a one bedroom, one bathroom unit if you know, if you're lucky, depending on the area. So it's not very much that you can do with $200,000 with a typical real estate investment in Miami. If you go to other markets, yes, you may be able to buy more units, but again, it's a concept. The concept is, show me that the investment is sufficient to establish a viable enterprise, a company that is ready to operate. That's the underlying concept. So we go case by case. The other example that I wanted to share with you is, you know, service companies, you know, service-based companies, they, let's say consulting business. I mean, all you need is an office, 4 chairs, a desk, a website. You can even work from home. So the real required investment for that type of business is really low. So again, it's a concept. But then that's one side of the answer. The other side is what Timo said, between, you know, starting at $100,000, and that's in the FAM, let's say in the manual that consular officers read and use to guide their review and decision-making process. You know, the $100,000 amount is there kind of as a guideline. So as Timo said, it's $100,000 and up is safe. That doesn't mean that any investment below 100,000 cannot be successfully used for an E2 case. It's more challenging. The lowest investment we've done was 12,338. It is an extremely risky and unique case. You know, was approved because the other elements of the case were super strong, but it's a rare case. So again, I want to underline the concept or the idea that the minimum investment is a concept. So when we do a business plan, you know, we try to think like a consular officer and understand whether the amount that the investor is planning to invest or commit is sufficient to establish a viable enterprise that is ready to operate and conduct business.
Right. I think, Leonie, we have some more questions. Maybe, I mean, what we're talking about right now, and also what Marco said, are general, you know, general terms for E2 investment visas. There's some specifics when it comes to real estate investments, which is, of course, the topic of this discussion. So we have to keep a few things in mind here. When it comes to real estate investments, in general, a real estate investment and invest in an investment property is usually not very suitable for an E2 investor visa. That you know, is the first thing, because as I said, you know, it has to be an active business that is involved. So most real estate investments are passive in nature. If you only buy a property and rent it, maybe, and that does not involve a lot of, you know, maintenance or anything, then you will not qualify for an active investment. Active means that the applicant, you know, is really hands-on in the business, that it's required for him to come to the US. Another requirement for the E2 visa is to come to the US to develop and direct. And that means that he has to be actively involved in the business, which means the business has to have a certain size that it requires him to manage the business, and cannot be done just by, let's say, a real estate management company. But the applicant has to be really hands-on and be involved in a business. So active real estate investment versus passive real estate investment. Active real estate investment would mean that you, let's say, rent out properties, or, you know, do the classical flip. You buy properties or develop them and then sell them for a profit. So that's the traditional active investment. And with such an active investment, you may qualify for an E2 visa if all the other requirements are, met. So when it comes to real estate investments, I would always say if you just buy a holiday home, vacation home in the US, even though your investment amount may be a couple of $100,000, it will not qualify you for an E2 investor visa. I get this question all the time. If I buy a property in the US, why can't I get an investor visa? I, invested more than 100,000. But with real estate investments, usually the crucial element here is the activity, the active test. It has to be an active investment, and it cannot only be, money in a bank account or money invested in some property. Stocks and such passive investments also don't qualify. So you have to have an active business where the applicant really is actively involved.
So in other words, Timo, you would say you would have to, or someone would have to form or build a company, set up a company also in order to require for that, just not the real estate, just not buying the real estate.
Well, yes. I mean, if you consider obtaining an E2 investor visa through real estate, you have to become an active real estate professional or investor, which means there's also a limitation on how many apartments you have to have, or not a limitation, it's like a minimum requirement where we say 5 to 6 units is the least amount of investment that requires active participation and active that would qualify the real estate investment as an active investment. The more the better, and the more you do apart from only renting out real estate, the better also. A lot of people, here in the US, they buy fixer-uppers, and for a good price, and then they develop it, they rehab the property, and then they sell it again. Maybe they rent it for a certain amount of time in between. And for an E2 investor visa, it is not a requirement that you form a legal entity. You could also technically do it in your own name, as a sole proprietor, and do this investment and qualify for a visa. The legal entity has other reasons that, for asset protection reasons, you want to use a company that offers you limited liability, so only the equity or only the assets in the company are liable for any contracts or of that entity, and not your personal assets. Only the company assets are liable. So that's usually one of the first steps in doing an investor visa, that you form a legal entity, a company, a corporation, an LLC. What form of legal entity you use also depends on tax consequences that are tied to this or that legal entity. Corporation is different than an LLC. So this can only be determined in an individual consultation. This, by the way, as a lawyer, I have to say a little disclaimer here. This is only for informational purposes today. This is not legal advice that I'm giving here today. Cannot be and should not be construed as legal advice. Every case is different, and we can only, in an individual consultation, see what the best structure for you will be. And this cannot be, this shouldn't be deemed as legal advice here, and it is not meant to be. So just that much of a disclaimer I have to give as a lawyer.
Absolutely. You just mentioned tax consequences, so they always have to be, reviewed on an individual basis. Is there something like broad or general that you can say about tax consequences of a real estate investment, or is it always?
Well, I mean, real estate investments are are special investments in in the tax world, and there are some benefits to invest in real estate. For example, if you invest in real estate and you buy and sell and you hold the real estate for a certain amount of time, 12 months at least, then you have a preferred tax rate, the capital gains tax rate, which is 15 or 20% versus your regular income tax rate here in the U.S. If you can get this preferred tax rate, the capital gains tax rate depends on a few factors. Probably with a real estate investment that you want to qualify for an E2 visa, you will not get the preferred tax rate because you will be considered a dealer. Yeah, under U.S. tax law, that means a dealer is a person that purchases property with the intent to resell it, to sell it. Yeah? So you become a commercial investor that buys properties, maybe rehabs them, and then sells them again, even though he may have rented it for a certain period of time. But in general, you will be considered a dealer, and you will not get the preferred tax rate. Also, you will probably not be able to deduct your depreciation in the properties. If it's meant for resale, then they become inventory, and then you will have a less favorable tax treatment. You can circumvent that by forming a corporation, maybe. These are strategies to avoid dealer status. So there's a lot of things that play into this, and a lot of things that need to be considered. What legal entity would be the right one for your investment? Also, if you have co-investors, that's also a possibility if they come from the same country as you are. So you have to also think about how am I going to finance my real estate investment? Is it only going to be equity, or will I have finance in the form of loans or mortgages? And there are also certain rules also in order to qualify for the E2 visa that need to be met if you want to, let's say, finance your real estate investment. So, I mean, maybe Marco can also, enlighten us a little bit about the business aspect of real estate investments and what you have to keep in mind, because technically these are entrepreneurial visas. They're for people that want to start a business in the US, where the main goal is to create a profit and to have an active, viable, and a profitable business. And then the visa is kind of like the bonbon you get, in order, because you made that investment. And a lot of people that say, okay, I want to invest some money just to get the visa, that maybe not a good avenue to take. Or Marco, maybe about this.
Yes, definitely. Now, over the years, I would say that, of course, we have learned through experience, working with many immigration attorneys, but especially, I have engaged in conversations with consular officers, and I have picked their brains about how do they review cases? How do you make decisions? How do you determine when to say yes, meaning I approve the visa, and when to say no? And what Tim was saying is perfect example. I mean, it's if they envision or even think that your main purpose is to live in the States or be able to, enter the United States, and the business is just an afterthought, that's a problem. And they're even trained to kind of detect that in the process. So it's really the other way around. I have a legitimate interest in conducting business. I want to be active in the business, making at least major decisions for the business. I want to be directing and controlling the business and so on. And therefore I need the visa. So it's not the other way around it. And it's interesting depending on where the investor, I mean, which country the investor is coming from or residing in. Let me give you a perfect example. If and we've seen this many times in the past, if you're an investor living in the say in Mexico, or you're a Brazilian with a German passport living in Sao Paulo and you want to escape Brazil, consular officers are going to be paying close attention to the real reasons why you're applying for the E2. Is it because, again, you have a business that needs your presence, or is this just an excuse to get out of Brazil and get into the United States? So those kind of soft aspects play a huge role in how consular officers review cases. But I want to address, since we're talking about real estate today, I'd just like to share some successful cases and or business models or ways to work in the real estate field. Again, the typical and the first one that comes to mind is, hey, I want to buy properties, I want to flip them. Okay, yes, that can work, but we have to make sure that, again, the investment is sufficient to establish a viable enterprise. You're going to be direct or indirectly creating jobs in the United States and so on. But sometimes that is not enough. And then some investors have expanded their business model to, for example, offer property management for other investors. Now, it's very important to underline that this is an activity that requires a license. So it's not like anybody can offer property management starting today. The requirements in the state of Florida is you need to get your license, work for a couple of years for a real estate brokerage firm, and then you may be able to establish your own business. So property management could be potentially done, and this is where TIMA comes in through a third-party company and that type of thing. Others have in the past done an E2 saying, okay, look, I have access to investors overseas. What I'm going to be doing is bringing investors, and I'm going to be providing a service where, for example, I identify business opportunities, identify interesting opportunities in real estate. So I charge them a flat fee for that consulting business. And then once they invest the money, I'm going to be doing project management, not property management, but project management. If we're going to be building, if we're going to be remodeling, then I charge a fee, which is in most cases a percentage of the budget or cost to do the real estate project. And so that's a different business model. Some investors have even formed joint ventures where they get a split or a portion of, let's say, when the real estate project is done and is sold, okay, the investor gets a portion of the profits of that project. So there are many ways to, again, be active in the real estate sphere with different, services. It can be a combination of services. We've had clients that say, look, I want to do property, remodeling and provide, that type of service. Yes, that can be done. Be mindful always of the licensing requirements, but it can be done. So I would say that the possibilities are almost endless in real estate. Again, most people think initially the first thought is, okay, I'm going to invest in a couple of properties, but then you can expand that to other services. Again, if it's a legit business that you actually intend to develop and to grow in the United States. So those are cases that we have done business plans for, successful cases, and we're always glad, by the way, to explore the viability of a business model for E2 purposes or any other type of visa, even before the decision is made to actually pursue the visa, because we all want to make sure that it's going to fly, that it's going to work. And that's actually an interesting area of practice or service in our company, where we analyze and brainstorm with the attorney and the client. How can we make this work? Again, when there is a legit intention to develop business and not just as an excuse to get an A2 visa.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Timo, go ahead.
Are there more questions? Yeah.
There's one question regarding creating job opportunities. Marco, especially you working on business plans. Is there a minimum amount of employees that you would have to hire, or jobs that you would have to create in order to have a successful business plan?
Well,
okay.
If I may say something to that question, in general, there is no set amount of employees or anything. It's not even a requirement in the law to have an employee, but the whole issue plays into the marginal test. So basically, the investment cannot only be sufficient to support you, the investor. It has also be sufficient to support other people or to make a viable contribution to the US economy. And that is usually the case if you are able to have an employee. So there is no number of employees in the law that need to be there. And it always depends on what the business requires. Maybe Marco can also say something about that, but there is no set amount of employees. It's not even said that it has to be a full-time employee or it has to be an employee. It can also be a contractor, but most, depends on every individual case. And usually a full-time employee that is on a W-2 is the best thing you can have. Even better if it's an American or a green card holder. That is the best way to show that the business is not marginal, right? That it is not, that is a substantial business, as and not marginal. So and it depends on what you can. What you need for your business. Let's say we do the classical real estate investment that I get a lot, that Marco also mentioned. You buy a few properties, let's say a multi-family home, you have 7, 8 units, that requires some maintenance, and also, somebody has to, sign the lease contracts, determine if the renter, the tenant is suitable. All these things require some work and active involvement. So, and then let's say you also hire a handyman, a maintenance guy, or a woman, whatever, and that would be your employee. So that is a one form of doing it. I mean, there's lots and lots of different forms of real estate investment and real estate, involvement. Marco named a few, but maybe you can also, Marco, give us some insight from a business perspective of what is needed.
Perfect. Yes. Now, when now it's time for my disclaimer. I always will underline, we're not immigration attorneys. We actually work as part of a team with team on this case. So as he said, each case is different, and we do like to talk about the specifics of the case and see how we can address the requirement or the expectations to create jobs. And each case is different, and even each attorney has his or her own way of doing things. So in the past, we've done cases where there is no direct job creation whatsoever, but then we have a lot of job creation indirectly, companies working with general contractors that indirectly generate hundreds of jobs. In those cases, what you typically see is maybe, an operations manager or a project manager who could be a 1099. So that's a different way of doing it. As Timo said, W2 is kind of, let's say, the gold standard or the preferred route. But it depends on the case. But for real estate, the reality is that most of the job creation will come through the contractor, the general contractor, the air conditioning contractor, the electrician, the painter, the architects. If you're building something or remodeling something, structural engineer, and it's something that we actually highlight in the business plan so that we can educate the officer on, hey, this company doesn't have maybe an employee now, but look, it has already created jobs by indirectly, doing this through the contractors and so on. So
Yeah,
that's.
Yep. Sorry, Marco.
No, go ahead. I was going to.
It's kind of a little bit of a myth in immigration law that you already have hired those contractors or employees, but the business plan has to show that in the near future, in order to be able to operate your business, you will hire someone. And
Exactly.
as employees or independent contractors, it depends. Employees is the gold standard, but as Marco said, there may be investments where the job creation or the benefit to the U.S. economy is so big that actually an employee is not even needed, but so many contractors will work in that project that it may be sufficient. So that's also something that you have to decide as a real estate investor from a business point of view, if it makes really sense to have an employee, or if you just work with independent contractors, consultants, architects, builders, construction companies, that can also be a viable investment. But as I said, there's no set amount of employees you have to have. From an immigration attorney standpoint, I would say I would wish that we have at least one W2 employee that would make the application a lot safer and more successful. But as Marco said, there may be other options too. So we'll just have to educate the consular officer, that this will be a benefit to the U.S. economy.
Exactly.
Perfect.
And I would like to go back to the concept that I appreciate, Timo, you sharing it several times today. Safe petition. So I think it's important to underline the fact that when we're working on these cases with the attorney, we use a risk management approach, because there is no absolute minimum number of anything nowhere to be found. So it's about the level of risk that a particular investor has appetite for, and that's where Timo's comment about educating our clients is key, because again, there is no set of minimum magical number. Our job, right, Timo, would be easier if we were dealing with, for example, with an EB5, you either have the 10 positions or you don't. I mean, there is no space for interpretation. It's yes or no. So again, it's about the risk level. Of course, the more employees, the higher the investment, the more things that, let's say, the business plan has, but it has to be realistic, of course, the safer that the case is going to be from the business plan perspective. I'm not even talking about the rest of the petition that Timo puts together. Now, that's the approach. How safe and how high or low is the risk? that we're running with the business planning, how can we address and mitigate that risk?
I don't know if-
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry, Timo, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just asking, do we have any more questions?
No, that's it. So you've answered amazing, a lot of questions actually already just by talking. We had received some questions beforehand. I mean, I did forward them to you also, but yes, all questions were actually answered so far. We haven't received any further questions. To me, hosting these webinars, it's always so interesting. I feel I learned so much about all of these topics. It was very, very interesting. I have shared all of your, or both of your information. Kirsten shared the information for Florida Sun. So to
Yes.
everybody, yes, thank you for joining. If you have further questions, these are the go-to people. Thank you very, very much for your time, and it was absolutely interesting. And yeah, if there's, sorry, it's a bit loud here right now. If there's nothing else from anyone, then yeah, thank you everybody for joining. I will again
Thank you,
upload
Leonie.
this also
Thank
to
you.
YouTube throughout the day. It always takes a bit of a time. And I already shared the YouTube link for previous webinars, and then on the same link later on today, you will see this webinar or this discussion round too. So yeah, perfect. Thank you, everybody. I wish
Thank
you
you
a
very
great and
much.
successful day.
Thank
Now
you.
know a little bit more about all of the investments. Yeah, then thank you for your time and see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
For participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.